Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Chris Dyer, and we're just meeting for the first time. This is another one of our first conversations, and I know it's going to be special because they all are, but they're each are special and unique in their own way. So, Chris, I'm glad to meet you. I look forward to finding out about you. I love your glasses. You're a friend of Phil Gerbyshak's, who also wears crazy glasses too, and it's good to have you here. And so tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me on the show, Ed. My name is Chris Dyer, and I'm the culture guy. That's probably the easy way to say it. I have written a few books on culture. I'm a keynote speaker on culture and really helping companies focus on where they should actually put their time, effort, energy, and dollars into making culture right. I believe that leaders believe in culture. Most leaders think culture is important, but most of them have no idea where to focus and have no idea what they're supposed to do to make it happen. And that's where I come in and bring my expertise, passion, and my crazy glasses, one company at a time to try to help them.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And it's a group effort, isn't it?
It is. Anything worth doing is a group effort, I think. But yeah.
I totally agree. And that's why I really resist, all these people who write about and they write books about the CEO as the culture creator. Yeah, no, that's not really it. They don't know culture. They know finance. Most of them. So tell us about culture and what do we need to know about culture, and if you're the head of a company and you don't know anything about culture, what do they actually need to do?
Sure. So I talk a lot about like what do you have to do to be good? What are the minimum things you need to do? And
Mm-hmm.
this is where I think the CEO or the senior leaders really come into play, right? They have to at least tell you this is the direction we're going. Like this is who we are. People like us do things like this. How you feel at Amazon is going to be different than how you feel at Google,
Right.
right? Even if their cultures are both great, they're going to feel very differently.
That's right.
And so you've got to define that. And that's vision statements and what are your values and your customer service statement and all that kind of stuff you can put together. What do we do? How do we do it? Why do we do it? All of that stuff. That's what you got to do to be good. Okay. And most companies are failing even at that to be good.
Mhm.
They have a few words on a wall somewhere that no one's paid attention to in 13 years, and that employees have no idea they even exist and things like that. Where I come into play is if you want to be great, now there's 7 areas that you have to be really, really put your focus in, and that's where the company, all of the employees, all the stakeholders, all your board members, everyone is involved in the company now becomes a part of that conversation.
Yeah.
So, we're on the boat. We know which direction we're going, but you need everyone rowing in the same direction, working together and talking about things. So, I have these 7-pillar process that I talk about in my books that is really key. And this is not just my opinion. This is, based on all of the research that I've done, others have done, hundreds and hundreds of interviews with like yourself being a podcast host and hearing the best companies seem to be consistently doing these things. And that's where they got us to kind of start.
So do you want to go through those 7 with us?
Sure, sure.
Sounds great.
So
And
yeah,
we
so
can.
pillar one is transparency.
Mm-hmm.
The more transparent the organization, the better off everybody is, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? Well, I'll give you a good example of what we did. And every company interprets this differently, and that's okay. But what we did is we took an example from Jack Stack in his book, Great Game of Business. We gave everyone a copy of our P&L every month. We provided our financials to every employee, and we had a meeting about it. And we talked about it, and we were open about this is going good and this isn't going good, and profits up this month, or we're in the hole this month, or whatever the story was. And I was afraid as a CEO as an entrepreneur. I was afraid if I showed them that, I would get questions I didn't want to answer. That was the first aha moment. I need to remove those things that it would be a problem. If I don't want to talk about it, if I'm gonna be embarrassed or it's uncomfortable, that's a problem, right?
Hmm.
We had to work on that. But more importantly, my employees came back with phenomenal ideas. They saw where we were spending the money. They saw how the sausage is made on the finance side. And they started coming to us and saying, do you know we could sell more over here? Or do you know we could save money if we did this thing over here? And when they understood what I understood, they did a better job of coming up with better ideas, right? So transparency is huge. Another way you could think about it is just sharing goals.
Yeah.
Like, did you ever know your fellow employees' goals or even what your boss's goals were? I know I didn't before, doing this. Like, it would seem like everyone had their own little thing and they were in a silo and no one ever talked about it.
Right.
I, I want to help everyone achieve their goals, but if I don't know what they're trying to do, I can't help them, right? Or are my goals and your goals totally in conflict? Can only one of us win this year? That's a problem too.
Yeah.
So transparency really deals with all that.
I like that. I like that very much. Because what you're saying, if you're the CEO or the business owner, what you're saying is, I trust you all. And not only do I trust you all with the information, I trust that you're going to use it well and that you have the company's best interest in mind. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so important. And they typically do have the company's best interest in mind. That's what
Yeah.
I've seen.
Yeah,
And
because they want the company to survive. They want to have a job. They want to have a place they like to work, right?
yeah,
I was afraid people would see we had a real good month and they would all come running to me and ask for a raise, right? That was the natural sort of fear. And that never happened, not one time, And the second fear was, well, if we had a really bad month or a really bad quarter, would people get scared and run away? Would they leave?
yeah,
And that never happened, right? Because we talked about it, what we were doing, how we were going to solve the problem, what this meant. We were open and honest and answered their questions. And so they felt better about it.
yeah. I totally see that, in the consulting I've done, where you have hidden things. That's what you think. You're hiding this from them. They all know what's going on. Everybody, now there's nothing hidden any longer. It's all out
No.
there. You just have to
Yeah.
kind of own up to it.
Yeah.
That's great.
So the next pillar is positivity.
Hmm.
And that means that we have to look at situations and say, what can we learn from this? How can we make this better? What's good about this? But the better example is the best companies say, let's just say you have 10 salespeople, right? And you got two that are killing it. In fact, those two are making half your number, right?
Right.
Then you
Right.
got a bunch of people in the middle, and then you got two people that are absolutely terrible. How did we ever hire them as salespeople? Like, what's going on? Well, bad companies, for the average company, they go and they put those two people on the bottom on the pip. They throw all kinds of time and energy around them. They send them to more trainings, all this stuff, right? The best companies go in and say, what are those two people up the top doing? Why are they successful? They get curious and they take that information again, and they're transparent and they share it with everybody else. And they use that to lift everybody else up to make them better. And if those bottom two people can't figure it out, we're not going to waste our time and energy on that. They need to go and we'll have to find somebody else, right? We're not going to waste hundreds of man hours trying to bring somebody up to be a good salesperson. Maybe that's just, they're not a good fit here or they're not a good salesperson, right?
Right.
So knowing how to think about, positively, how do we say yes to things, right? Just saying yes creates so much innovation for companies.
I love this. I'm gonna write this down. I'm sorry, I got to write this down because um, I think this is really everyone. You need to be listening to this because this is really going to help you significantly in the next week if you were to implement these 7 things. And we've only heard 2 so far. So if you implement these 7 things in the next week, you're gonna see a difference immediately. Am I right?
If you just started saying yes to everything that was asked of you, and there's the funny Jim Carrey movie about this. There's an old British
Oh yeah.
movie about, but it really does help. Now, I suggest you don't tell people you're going to say yes to everything, but
Yeah.
your family and your teenagers especially will run you ragged. But if they don't know, but you're just the kind of person that says yes, now you can say yes and yes but, right? You can find a way to protect yourself against certain things, but you know, it was so liberating when I started saying yes to everything.
Is that number 3?
No, that's the second pillar still. That's positivity. That's part of it. So number 3, there's no particular order, they're just 7, but the
Okay.
next one that pops in my head is listening.
Uh-huh.
So great companies, great leaders, great cultures listen. And that means that they have mechanisms in place to make sure that they get that information. That means that we do things to make sure people feel heard. It's not just that we're good listeners, but that we somehow demonstrate, I heard you. This is what I did. This is how I'm going to fix that for you. And so being great listeners is important for our employees, is important for our customers, is important for everyone in the entire ecosystem of your business.
So
Go ahead.
how does a company listen to its clients or customers?
So certainly surveys are great ways to do that. Working with clients and giving them opportunities to tell us what they're seeing in the marketplace, showing them demos of things that are coming up, giving them the opportunity to be a part of that process and provide us with information, right? So that we can make good decisions. And again, to be heard. So if they have a complaint, if they have a problem, and this is happening consistently, that we can go back to them and say, we heard you when you said this report takes way too long to get to you. You need this sooner. We have fixed that problem. And here's what we did. And now you're going to get this thing quicker. We heard you, right? So it is one part is making sure you have the mechanisms in place to get the information. But the second part is make sure you actually do something with the information, right? To get somewhere.
Right. Totally. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I did, it depends on the size of your organization, but let's just say you're an average leader in an average company. You've got 5, 10, 20 reports, whatever it is, right? And you're thinking, well, how the heck do I listen better, right? One of the things that I highly suggest is that you start a weekly survey and just send your people one question a week, just one. I hate annual surveys. I think they're stupid, right? You send them this long survey. It takes you a month. They don't ever fill it all out. You get a partial reading. Then it takes you all this time to figure out what they said and what's important. Then it takes you months to figure out how to actually come up with a solution and a program or something. And by then, all of their problems have changed or they've left. So I always did a weekly survey, and I asked questions like, what's keeping you up at night? What are we doing great? Where are we failing? How could we support you better? What do you wish you had that you don't have right now to be more successful? Who's killing it for us right now? Like, who do you want to spotlight in the organization that's helping? Who's our best clients? Who's our worst clients? Just all these different types of things. I'd hear it, go back and say, this is what I heard. This is what we're going to do about it. Right. And that was really powerful.
I'm thinking about what the annual report would be like if you took the answers to all those over the 52 weeks of the year and you compiled them all into one document. That would be quite insightful.
So I mixed the questions about, so like usually the first quarter of the year, I would ask them questions and I would tell them, whatever you answer anonymously, but whatever you write in there, I'm sharing with everybody. So, but I also asked questions that I felt like the answers were going to be okay. Then the next 3 months, I would ask them questions and I would say, I'm the only one that's ever going to see the answer. And I might ask them tougher things or things that they might want some privacy. If they feel like they could share something a bit more important. I might repeat the sentiment of what they said, but I'm never going to show anybody exactly what they wrote so no one could ever know it was them or whatever. And I would go every 3 months, I would flip it. So sometimes I was overly transparent. To your point, I could show everyone all that data, and we would do some of that stuff. We would compile all of that and share it back at the end of the year. But there were times where it was important for them to have that safety, that psychological safety, to be able to come back to me and say, I don't want to tell you this, but that manager is just pissing people off, and you got to know this, right? And I'm like, wow, geez, why didn't anybody ever tell me? Right? Because they were scared. They didn't want to lose their job. They would get in trouble, right? And so they tell me things I needed to hear when we did it that way.
And so, in your advice to a business owner when they receive that kind of information, what do you say to them if they're getting one person saying that and no one else saying that, but they feel like it's legitimate? What is it? What's your advice to them about what they should do with that information?
Well, if they don't know who the person is that said it, because sometimes if you know who said it, then you have the context to know whether or not that's credible. If only they're the only ones saying it, you know who they are, versus if you don't know who it is and they're saying it, I think it's always worth doing your own investigation and poking around and having an open mind and saying, I at least need to figure this out, right? Or maybe need to ask 2 or 3 other people in the company, what do they think? Or find a way to kind of pull it out of them to see if it's an issue. But we rarely had problem children in my company because we would get rid of them pretty quickly. So if somebody raised their hand like that, I would think this is a legitimate concern, something I definitely want to think about tracking down.
Yeah. I did a project for a company where something like that occurred, having to do with one of the senior level, one of the C-suite people. And, we had, and I was asked by the CEO to kind of do the research to find out what's actually going on and what was, and then offer a remedy, and we offered a remedy, and, eventually the person, within a matter of a week, he had resigned and left the company, because he was creating chaos, but nobody wanted to talk about it openly, but through the network, you found out. I think that's really great. That's really great stuff.
So the next pillar is measurement. Great companies know how to measure the right things, right? They're not measuring everything, but they're measuring what's important and what is going to help them grow and get better as a company. So maybe you're measuring your customer service satisfaction, or maybe you're measuring the time it takes to respond to a customer service inquiry, or maybe you're measuring your uptime or your website speed or whatever. I mean, everyone has a different set of metrics and KPIs and things that are important to them. But do you know what they are? Are you measuring them? And are you talking about them with your company, right? With your people all the time? It's really, really important. This is probably the thing that Google does better than anybody else. They measure what they measure, right? I mean, they measure so much. People don't realize how much time they spend measuring and thinking about it and changing and articulating. I mean, they got curious one day and said, I wonder why do some teams do well and some teams don't? Why do some teams over deliver and others don't? And they went and figured that out because it was important to them, right? So measurement is a really, really key.
Let me do a segue into here and ask you a specific question about culture, because what I'm hearing you say is that culture is not the content that we deliver to people. It's rather the relationship context that we create for people. Am I right about that?
Yeah, it's about the norms and it's how we get things done and why do we do it this way and how do we do it this way. And it's all about relationships. Absolutely. Right. It's not this, I'm going to stand up on my, pedestal up here and bark at you from the top down. And that's culture. That will create some culture, but that doesn't make you a great culture.
After 50 years of doing leadership work of various types in various ways, one of the things that I see, and this is a phrase that I use a lot, and I think this is describing what you're telling us, is that there's a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it resides in the relationships of the people. And that to me is how I describe culture. There's a culture of values that really defines how we're going to relate to one another. And in many cases, that defines the company rather than whatever the marketing company department is saying about the company.
Yeah. I mean, marketing is as out delivering a particular message, but rarely is that a cultural message. Now, some of the best companies, it is. You look at Red Bull. Do you know Red Bull will never put their product on Instagram? All they talk about is the other stuff they're doing and how it makes you feel and all, right? So there is this whole connection in there. It seems insane to me that you would never see a can of Red Bull in an Instagram post or an ad,
No.
right? But they're selling the brand and the culture and who they are and why they exist through other means, right? So it is absolutely about those relationships.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So
yeah,
what's next?
Let's see. The next one is recognition. The greatest companies in the world, greatest cultures recognize people, have a system of recognition. I'm a big proponent for a free, non-cost solution. I think just thanking people, patting them on the back. We had on our Slack, we had a little room that was called our water cooler, and anybody could go in there and thank anybody. In fact, we trained our people that they needed to go in there and thank people. It was their responsibility, not the manager's responsibility. They saw something great, go in and thank them, right?
Yeah.
And we actually train our managers to not do so much of the thanking publicly because we didn't want it to be a top-down thing, right? If they knew someone needed to be thanked, we said, why don't you nudge another team member to thank them for them? And we created this bottom-up culture of recognition to the point where people felt comfortable even thanking their boss or thanking another manager. It didn't come off as brown-nosing because we were in there constantly high-fiving each other and saying, good job, and wow, you really handled that call great, or geez, thanks for coming up with this great solution, or you taught me how to do a pivot table today, or whatever the thing was that someone else helped them do, right?
Right.
But you got to have a program.
That's fantastic. I've seen that as well in my experience, and what I realize is that gratitude is often treated as something I'm going to feel grateful because I want to feel good, but gratitude is really something you give away. You got to give it to people because then it comes back to you in terms of a return of appreciation. And if you build that kind of relationship within your company, or within your family, or within your neighborhood, or within your sports team, whatever it means, whatever you got people gathering together, if you can build that kind of thing into the way y'all relate, it's magic.
And what's crazy is that, when we receive that thank you, it's huge, right? It's like scoring the touchdown. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
The problem is we don't get that often.
That's true.
But when you are giving the thanks, it feels almost as good. And yet you can do it all the time. When that adds up, that's actually better. You feel happier. You feel like more connected when you've given 2 or 3 thank yous today versus getting that one a week you might get, just to spread across the whole team or whatever. So it's huge.
A dozen years ago, I got, well, it's more than that. It's more like 15 years ago, 17 years, 18 years ago. I don't know. It's a long time. I got into I was in a contest. We won't go into this, but the contest was writing a rule or a suggestion to a kid who was going to change his career. It was a career guide kind of thing. And I said, my answer was say thanks every day. And out of that emerged what I call the 5 actions of gratitude, or we say thanks, we give back, we make welcome, we honor others, and we create goodness. And if we were to do those 5 things every day or every week, and we track those, if we actually said this week I did this and this and this and this, and everyone was to track that, then you would see a tremendous change, because people would have a sense of not only being appreciated, but they'd also have a sense of that what they were doing is actually contributing to the benefit of the whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a pretty good barometer of what's going on in your company. If you can't get people to thank each other, right? If you're not noticing a lot of thanks happening, there's something else going on, and you need to, that's a really good time to go start sniffing around. Like, is there bad attitudes? Is there a problem child employee? Is there a bad manager? Is there, I don't know, they too stressed? Is there too much work, not enough staff? Like, what's the problem that if they can't take 2 seconds to say thank you to somebody, right? You got a problem. And so I would notice if there would be a kind of nabbing there, right, of those thank yous. I'm like, okay, what's going on? People stressed out, you know, and we would go and try to find out what was going on. And when things were good, those thank yous, man, they were going.
Yeah,
It was great.
I did see that as a measurement, a tool for tracking how people were feeling about things. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like this.
Yeah. So we got 2 more to go. The next one is uniqueness. And uniqueness is great companies focus on what makes them unique, on what makes their people unique, right? What makes their clients unique. And this gets into marketing, this gets into their DE&I programs, this gets into all sorts of areas. But what I noticed that companies that struggle to find and retain great talent is that they focus on bringing people into the same. They're just like them, right? Or they find a client and they want to go find 10 more of the exact same kind of client. And that kind of puts them in a hole, right?
Yeah.
So when we want to understand what makes each person unique, each client unique, each situation unique, and we understand that to a high level, then we can go and do our best, right, for them. And so uniqueness is a really interesting way to kind of look at diversity of thought, diversity of approach, giving people the ability to have autonomy and getting the work done. So we're not saying there's only one way to do something. We're saying we understand that 5 people who all work in the same job may do it slightly differently because that's what works for them, right? Because their brains work differently. They had different upbringings. I don't know, different schooling or whatever. But what matters is the output. What matters is did the job get done and did we do a good job, right? So I know uniqueness kind of came pretty late in that process for me. It was one of those big, like, when I finally got it, it was, why is no one talking about this, right? To realize that that's what the best companies were doing.
So, uniqueness is actually an analog of diversity in that regard.
It is. It is. In part, right? It's not the entire pillar, but it's also like getting really good at marketing, right? And understanding what your unique selling points are, or what is unique about your clients. But on the employee side, it's definitely on the diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yeah.
Well, what I'm thinking is that you want a variety of people on your sales force who can sell what you're offering to a variety of organizations, and each one of those people is going to be really well suited to a different type of company or a different market or something like that. That's kind of what I'm seeing what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the final pillar is mistakes. And I always do this one last because it's the only one with a negative word in it. And the reason I call that pillar mistakes is because great companies know how to leverage and deal with mistakes in a positive way. Now, for distinction, there are errors and there are mistakes. And I am not talking about errors. I'm not saying somebody can go around and keep screwing things up all day and you should keep them around as an employee, right? You're going to go out of business pretty quickly or someone's going to get hurt.
Right.
And errors come from things like being poorly trained or overwork or not getting enough sleep or multitasking, things that we shouldn't be doing, right? If a nurse gave you the wrong medication when you're in the hospital, that's usually an error, right? And that's not good. Mistakes are, I thought I would try today to do this differently, or a client called me and they wanted something we had never done before, so I tried this new thing, but it didn't work out, right? I tried and I thought it was going to work and it didn't. And so can we learn from that? Can we get better from that? Or maybe I tried something new and guess what? It actually worked. And I just discovered this whole cool new way to do something faster, better, or we can charge for that or whatever it is. But people have to have that freedom to be able to do that. And the two best examples, I won't tell the long versions of these stories, but the Post-it note is a mistake. The glue was a mistake. And they logged it and they categorized it. And 20 years later, another scientist came around and said, are there any crappy glues that have ever been invented? Because he needed a really crappy one that just barely stuck to something. Turned out there was, right? And now they have the Post-it note. The other one is Southwest Airlines is famous for saying, we will stand by our employees. If they thought they were doing the right thing for the customer, they made a decision, we will stand by them. Publicly, you will never hear Southwest say our employees screwed up or did the wrong thing or whatever. They will stand by them. Now, privately, they may retrain them or figure out how to do it differently next time if they don't think it was the right decision. But those employees, that's why they talk, do comedy routines on the mic, and why they, they have a looseness to them, and a casualness to them, because the company's got their back. They're not worried about losing their job if they make the wrong choice. So they know they'll have an open discussion about it and figure it out.
That's really a significant thing to be able to say to an employee. Says, we have your back. You do your best, and when you make a mistake, we'll figure out what to do with that.
Yeah. And, in measurement, we didn't talk about some of the systems you can bring in, like Scrum or Six Sigma or Lean. There's all these different programs. I have my favorite. You probably have your favorite. The point is they should just use one, so you have a framework.
Right.
But in most of those systems, there is a place for something similar to a retrospective, meaning when we're done doing the thing, let's talk about what worked and what didn't work, and what can we learn from that? Instead of, gee, Ed, you really screwed up that client meeting, you're fired, or you're never going to one of those again, right? Yeah, I've heard that from managers. Somebody tried something, it didn't work, and then they get mad at them or they cut them out. We can't ever screw up. We can't ever make any mistakes. And that's not how you learn. That's not how you get better.
When I first started doing leadership work a long time ago, I would ask people, are you a leader? And they say, oh, don't call me that. I don't want to be known as that. And I said, why?
Yeah.
Well, the leader is the one with the target on his back. And I said, okay, tell me this. Are you a person who wants to make a difference that matters? Oh, yeah, that's what I want to do. So, well, that's how I define leadership. Oh, well, yeah, I like that, but don't call me a leader.
Okay.
It's still that perception still reigns, and they feel like they take on responsibility that they don't want to have. They feel there's a target on their back and that sort of thing. But that's because of the way we've always been doing leadership, or always been doing work, organizations, the way we do the organizations. And so what you're talking about is a significant change in the way we, and I would take it to another level. What you're really are suggesting that we should change the way we structure the organization. And that's not a comfortable thing for a lot of people. So how do you talk about that? Let's say a company comes to you and you begin this conversation with them about why they need to change their culture. What is it that you say to them? How do you communicate to them this in a way that makes them ready to say, okay, I'm willing to listen to you?
There's a couple things. Usually if they're coming to me, they have something going on, right? Where maybe they've not gotten where they expected to be, or maybe they feel like whatever's happening with their culture or their people is getting in the way of what they want to do. And so usually my advice is pretty simple. It's, don't let your dreams stay dreams. if you started this company and you have a dream to get to somewhere, it's going to stay a dream if you don't address this, right?
Right.
The power is you as the leader. You have the power to make this right. You have the power to make it better for your people. And you have to decide whether or not you're going to be a mediocre boss or you're going to be an exceptional one. And to your point about having a target on your back, I think the other feeling that people have is that if you're going to be exceptional at anything, it's hard. It's a lot of work. It's a lot easier to be a mediocre boss, a mediocre business owner, a mediocre employee. It is easy to do that. Show up, get a paycheck, and leave. But when we do that, our dreams stay dreams, right? Our goals just stay goals, just words on the paper. And so you have to decide if you're willing and ready to actually take that step up to the next level. And if you are, yeah, welcome to leadership. It's going to be a little harder, but you can do it.
So there are things that this is what I see. There are things in every business which are non-negotiable, meaning that we will not talk about those things. And a lot of times they have to do with the insecurity of the senior person.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about this thing or that thing. What I say to them is those should be negotiable things. Everything should be negotiable except your values. Those are the non-negotiable things, because that's what's going to pull people together and cause them to stay with you. That's the foundation. And you must even be willing to suffer to hold true to your values, because out of that will come the strength to go find the new place for you to go, where your values will carry you and bring you to a level of impact that you won't be able to get there otherwise. So that's I hear you saying that, and I really support that. I really like what you're saying, because I'm going through the Rolodex of all these companies that I've worked with over the last, since I was in college. I started doing stuff in college, and if all of those had followed what you have suggested to us in this conversation, the world would be a different place, and those communities where these businesses are would be in a different place. And so I really think what you got there is really real gold for us all.
Well, and the good news is, for most people out there listening, there are a lot of companies doing that. There are a lot of great leaders. We've all had great bosses. We've all worked at great companies.
Yeah.
They're out there, right?
Yeah.
And so I on the flip side, I always tell people not to settle. You got to feed your family, and sometimes you're in situations where you can't leave or whatever. But like, if you're not happy and this is not doing it for you, the power, you have the power too.
Yeah.
And you can go find that company that is right for you, right?
Yes.
I like to believe that what is coming is better than what is already gone. And
I totally agree with you.
And that's a positive. Until I'm officially gone off to this earth, I'm always going to believe that what the next thing that's coming is going to be better than what's gone.
I agree. So tell us how to find you if we want to have some interaction with you, because I think people want to. So how do
you can certainly go to chrisdyer.com. That's DYER. You can find my books on Amazon. The Power of Company Culture, the second edition just came out late last year. And I'm happy to connect with people on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. I don't know, wherever you hang out and like to have your community, I'm probably there, and I'm happy to connect with you.
Well, we'll put all of those in the show notes of the podcast so that people can find you. And I'm really grateful for you to be here, and thank you. And I'm going to be thinking about this for a while, and because I've got some situations that I get to apply some of this. So thank you, Chris, for coming on.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you having me on the show and taking the time to have these first conversations. I think it's a fantastic idea. I love it.
I appreciate that. And I thank you all for watching. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and if you have a comment, leave it so that we may know what you're thinking. And we appreciate you doing that. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. See you later. Bye-bye.